1095 to 1600. In the 11th century, Jerusalem, also known as the Holy Land, came under the control of Muslims. Jerusalem was important to the Muslims because that was where Muhammad rose to heaven. It was also very important to the Christians because it was where Jesus was born and crucified. So Pope Urban II gave a speech in 1095 motivating Christians to go and regain Jerusalem. That event was known as the Crusades. Many Christians went because they believed that if they fought for the Holy Land, they guaranteed themselves a place in heaven and to have all their sins forgiven. The Christians then traveled to Jerusalem in hopes of regaining the Holy Land. While the Christians were in Jerusalem, they didn't want to acknowledge that the Muslims built the Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem because they felt like the Muslims' beliefs were wrong. So instead, they referred to it as the Temple of Solomon, a Jewish temple built on the site of Al-Aqsa that was destroyed. However, the Muslims had a different perspective. In their eyes, foreigners were invading and capturing their land. Foreigners were also slaughtering Muslims, leading towards lots of tragedy for them. People cried over the stories told by the survivors of how Jerusalem was taken. Crusades went on for hundreds of years because Christians and Muslims were fighting back and forth to seize control of Jerusalem. While the Christian crusaders were in Jerusalem, they realized how much more advanced the Middle East were in terms of education and art. The Middle East had built universities and libraries where people could study science and medicine. They translated ancient works of Greeks and Romans and continued to add on to them. A famous Islamic scholar, Ibn Sina, was the first person to describe anesthesia. After the Crusades, the Crusaders took the ideas of the Middle East and brought them back to Europe, which caused an exchange of culture. They brought back ideas from the Middle East because Crusaders were impressed by how advanced the Middle East was.
Ideas like learning more about the outside world or learning from other cultures never really existed in Europe before the Crusades. Christians had a strong belief in God and revolved their thoughts around God and church. The Crusades also led towards new trading opportunities because the Christians were closer than ever to trade routes in the East, such as Alexandria and Baghdad. They started to trade spices, paper, and metalwork. From the start of trade between Europe and Asia, the Black Death arrived in Europe. During that time, people started to move away from church because they realized that God didn't have all the answers and that they shouldn't place all their trust in God. People still died no matter how much they prayed or worshipped God. Because of that, they began to think outside the box. People started exchanging items and new ideas with other cultures. Those events led to the Renaissance. It led to the Renaissance because people realized God wasn't capable of everything that people believed. The Europeans brought back ideas from other cultures, such as the Middle East, and started to learn from the cultures. The Europeans started reading works from the ancient Greeks and Romans inspired by the Middle East. People in the Middle East had translated the works of Greeks and Romans and added on to them. Reading and studying those writings influenced the Europeans to use their brains. They started to move away from church and use reasoning over religious values. That caused lots of new invention, ideas such as education, and an era of exploration. All of these events, the Crusades and the Renaissance, was an important reawakening for Europeans. That was because they started to explore and connect with other places in the world. Also, it caused Europeans to expand their knowledge and look beyond their religious values. From the start of the First Crusade to the beginning of the Renaissance, all of these events that happened between 1095 to 1600 were all very important. These events influenced and caused many other significant history in all around the world.
11th century.
Wait, no.
Jerusalem. That
People started to they started to explore and connect with others.